Tim Challies is a steady and reliable hand in evangelical theological blogging, but he represents an evangelical impulse to cognitivize willpower, which is simply at odds with 21st century psychology research. Challies is a great guy, but he's wrong here, and this isn't a whatever works for you issue. Challies is universally incorrect about how discipline works, and we're going to understand why. In a recent article by Challies titled, "Think of the End to Motivate the Action," he argues that in order to motivate yourself to do something that you don't want to do, you should think of the benefits that you will receive from the action in order to perform it. So, Challies says, quote, "In so many ways, the good life, the godly life, demands thinking of the end in order to motivate the action. Too often we deny blessings to ourselves and others because we think more of the friction that precedes an action than the reward that follows it." End quote. This advice sounds very good, especially if you're used to Christian expositional preaching that utilizes the stock and trade of contemporary psychology, and we're going to get into that in a little bit. But the notion that you must have a strong sense of purpose in order to continuously execute heavy willpower tasks is most definitely true. So then, how is Challies saying, think of the end to motivate the action, untrue? We're going to get into that right here. Psychologists make an important distinction between these two ways of looking at human action. One is called cognitivism, and the other is called behaviorism. Cognitivism teaches that all actions are rooted in beliefs, and changing those beliefs is the most effective way to change habits. Behaviorism teaches that all actions are primarily a result of conditioning, and the optimal way of changing your habits is through reconditioning yourself through behavioral action. So, most common advice for goal achievement is cognitivist, especially in the evangelical culture. Okay, people will say, keep your eye on the ball, keep thinking of the Lord, keep praying, write down your goals, make a plan, and all that stuff is true enough as far as it goes, but it's very ineffective. And that is the big distinction between cognitivism and behaviorism, and kind of a cliche that psychologists make fun of, is that if you want to be right, be a cognitivist, but if you want to be effective, be a behaviorist. And if you want to have a theoretically correct theology or philosophy of habit formation, you should listen to the cognitivists and start by focusing on your mind. Take a logocentric approach to behavioral change. But if you want to actually achieve your dreams and build a superhuman willpower and crush your goals, then you listen to the behaviorists. And inserting thinking into your protocol for executing heavy willpower tasks is a guaranteed way of keeping your goals small and keeping your habits disappointingly small. If you apply a cognitivist approach to building your discipline, you force yourself to make two decisions every time you have to do something hard instead of one decision, okay? And let me just explain that, all right? Instead of just doing the hard task that you have to do, you end up requiring yourself to think rightly about doing the task in order to motivate yourself to do the task, and then actually doing the task. It's a classic case of overthinking sabotaging efficacy. And there was, in the 1980s and 1990s, a surge of cognitivism, and most practical evangelical advice today about behavioral change in the 21st century seems to be rooted in this outdated psychological fad, which the discipline of psychology has already self-corrected. Psychology has swung in the 21st century heavily toward behaviorism as science has progressed, since behaviorism is both a simpler account of psychological suffering and being stuck, and has produced far more effective and enduring practices for behavior change than cognitivism. And that's not to say, now I know what you're thinking, right? Well, are you saying that having a mindset change doesn't play a role at all in habit change? Because certainly people have had these gestalt moments where they've had a change of perspective and changed their lives. Of course, any behavior change that you produce in your life is going to have a cognitive effect. It's going to include some kind of cognitive mediation of that change. It's not to say that cognitive change plays no role in behavior change, but it is not the fundamental means by which you modify your behavior from either a lack of a good habit or addiction to a bad habit. It's cognitive modification is not the primary means by which you change this thing. paradoxically, and this is going to sound very trite, but perhaps not cliche because many people don't say this. The most effective and lasting method of behavior modification is behaviorist conditioning. What do I mean? Well, we'll get into that in a second. So, the reason that evangelicals typically utilize the stock and trade 80s and 90s psychological truisms is indicative of a typical evangelical laziness about real practicality. You hear this very often, especially in seminaries when you talk about biblical exposition. They'll have a whole section on application. But most of the times when you listen to a sermon, the application is the same, and it is recycled day after day, week after week, year after year. And we're just using the same biblical texts to make the same applications over and over and over again. And the evangelical conception of practicality often fails to be strategically sophisticated, truly life goal oriented, and it also fails to be usefully actionable because it genuinely does not care about human beings' work. It only cares about ideologically refortifying itself. The problem is that actually is not how the Bible works, and Christianity certainly doesn't have to work that way. And the reason that evangelicals often perpetuate these impractical notions of practicality is because of a smug biblicism, meaning that they insist on sourcing their insights about human nature exclusively from the Bible. And the consequence of this biblicism isn't actually a biblical understanding of how human beings work, but rather a reliance by evangelical writers on outdated pop psychology, which is all they have access to. And so what ends up happening is that they end up passing off what they've simply accrued through watching TV and talking to people throughout the 80s and 90s about how human beings work, and they pass that off as biblical wisdom. But because they truly don't care about sourcing an informed perspective about how human beings work from the world around them in a sophisticated way. In reality, Scripture coheres with and often predicts discoveries in psychology, but pastors are often culturally incentivized to believe that people should be able to think or cognitivize their way out of a lack of discipline, which simply isn't true. There is only one path toward lasting discipline, and that is a word you may have heard before, you may not have heard it before. It depends on what your college major was. And this word and this reality, which is the single path toward lasting discipline, is automaticity. And automaticity is you becoming automatic in what you do. Automaticity is the unthinking, instinctive aspect of human action. And the worst part about discipline is the fact that you have to force yourself to do it. That's the worst part of it. What if you could do a disciplined thing? What if you could do something that most people conceive of as a heavy willpower task, but you could do it without the excruciating emotion of having to push through it and make yourself do it? What if those heavy willpower tasks could just be easy for you? That is what automaticity is. It is making those things easy for you. How do you accomplish that? Well, the first thing you have to do, and the sort of the negative side of automaticity, is that you have to learn how to get to the place where you don't think about the action. And the smaller you can make the thought, the smaller you can make the requisite cognizance of a willpower act, the faster the task will be completed, and the sooner that heavy willpower task will feel like a lighter willpower task. Because the more you do it, the more it becomes automatic to you. Automaticity is the goal of your first several weeks of discipline. And your goal in creating a new habit is to make it as easy as breathing. You don't want to think about it. You don't want to cognize it. You don't want to have to think about the end goal. You want to show up and you want to do it. You want every rep to be something you power through. If you have to think about every rep, if you have to cognize your way through discipline, you will never make it. You want to make heavy willpower acts as automatic and unthinking as your heartbeat. Automaticity is necessary for several reasons. Number one, automaticity drastically decreases overall high willpower cost of difficult tasks, which increases your likelihood of compliance. So if you can convert the decision to lift heavy weights every single morning at an early hour from maxing out your willpower capacity, if you can convert that decision from being something that takes everything from you to something that, well, you barely notice the decision because it comes so naturally to you, you are far more likely to perform that task. So the first reason automaticity is necessary is because it takes heavy willpower decisions and makes them easy willpower decisions, or at least lighter willpower decisions. Number two, automaticity makes impossibly heavy willpower tasks easier. And this is something different than what I just said, okay? It makes impossibly heavy willpower tasks easier, since those tasks become variations of automaticity rather than insurmountable tasks. So so not only does automaticity, my first point, make difficult willpower tasks easier, it makes impossible willpower tasks easier as well. So those acts which you previously thought as impossible, like waking up and lifting weights every day at 3:59 a.m., which is something I at one point in my life thought would be impossible, which I now do every day. Well, it just becomes obvious, okay? Instead of asking, well, how could I ever do that? Well, then you think, well, obviously I'm going to do that, okay? Automaticity transforms failure from an inevitability to a faint possibility, okay? Automaticity transforms failure from something that's absolutely inevitable for you to just a faint possibility because you know you're going to execute your task. A recent study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that people with established habits were actually more likely to double down on consistency in those habits when life got extremely stressful. So when they had finals week, or when they had a death in the family, or when they had something that was really stressing them in their lives, people with already established habits, meaning people who had their habits codified with automaticity, were more likely to execute those habits when life got stressful than they would otherwise, as opposed to those who didn't have behaviorally automatized habits, who were more likely to abandon those goals when life became extremely stressful. So that's your first two things is one, automaticity makes hard willpower decisions easier. Two, automaticity makes impossible willpower decisions possible. Number three, automaticity creates a willpower surplus that you can apply to eradicate other self-sabotaging habits. So once you're no longer straining your mind and clenching your gut just to finish a task, and it will get easier after a week, then you can apply that energy to something else. Okay, you're waking up early and working out? Good. Time to quit lashing out at your spouse, or smoking, or drinking excessively, whatever it is, okay? Discipline is like a line of dominoes. Well, a better metaphor probably is that discipline is really just like cocaine, okay? The more discipline you get, the more you want, and the more you get hungry for it. But when you're not disciplined, you don't want to be disciplined, okay? Which leads us to our next point. What you believe about willpower determines your willpower. Okay, now what does this mean? Psychologists distinguish between two ways of viewing your own willpower, limited and non-limited. So if you have a limited view of your own willpower, that means that you believe your willpower is a depletable resource that you must ration throughout your day. If you have a non-limited view of willpower, you believe that the more you execute heavy willpower decisions, the stronger you become throughout the day in your willpower. It's like a superpower. The more you utilize it, the stronger you become. Okay, one study in the journal Frontiers in Psychology found that people with a limited view of willpower, which means that they believe their willpower could be depleted throughout the day, were actually less effective in achieving their goals. They had lower expectations of themselves and ultimately found that their beliefs about willpower determine whether demands prompt people to save their energies and put their goals on hold, or whether they encourage them to lean in and fully tap into their own resources. So what that means is that people who believe that their willpower is something they have to ration throughout the day accomplish their goals less, and they're less productive, and they actually are more likely to put their goals on hold. So that was a study, a meta-analysis, which is a study of many journals, a meta-analysis published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, published by the American Psychological Association, found that those who believed they needed to rest more often in order to accomplish their goals ended up achieving their goals less and effortlessly or effortfully pushing their goals left. So they were less zealous, they were less eager, they were less strenuous in the pursuit of their goals. What does that mean? That means if they believed that willpower was a depletable resource, they were more likely not to try as hard. Okay, subjects who believed that their self-control was a limited resource rather than a self-perpetuating resource. So subjects who believed that they had to ration their willpower actually ended up sitting down more and demonstrated worse self-control than those who believed that willpower utilization strengthened more willpower utilization. Which moves us to our next point. Your motivation is only as strong as your self-control, not vice versa. Okay, so it's not like, well, I'm only as self-controlled as I can be motivated. No. That's false. That's a lie. That will destroy all your willpower and all your goals. Most people fail to utilize motivation properly because they fail to make a very, very important distinction. And that is the distinction between motivation and inspiration. And even then, they fail to make a distinction between really three realities, which we're going to get to in a second. They fail to distinguish between motivation, inspiration, and discipline. And when they do distinguish between motivation and discipline, they often think that discipline relies upon motivation. And all of this is a step in the wrong direction. It's false. It's a lie. It is self-destructive. It is self-sabotaging. Motivation is an emotional upswell that accompanies an automatized habit that you've already established, that you've already cultivated. Okay, so motivation is something that keeps you where you are. It's the emotional upswell that keeps you going at the pace you've already set. It is a maintenance emotion. Okay. Inspiration is what prompts you to build the habit in the first place. So people often call inspiration motivation when they shouldn't. It's a bad nomenclature. They shouldn't apply the word or the term motivation to what is inspiration. Okay, inspiration. People often call inspiration motivation, and then they fail to cultivate the necessary strength of will to execute the habit because they don't conceive of discipline as based on strength of will. They conceive of it as based on motivation or some depletable emotional resource because they never had the habit behaviorally fortified in which motivation can properly operate. Motivation is like what your car does on cruise control, okay? It keeps you at pace. Inspiration is like what you do when you pull onto a high-speed highway, a one-time high-cost period of acceleration that gets you up to speed. That is the distinction that we need to make between the utility of these two emotions. What is the tactical purpose of motivation? It is to keep you the speed you're at. What is the tactical purpose, the utility of inspiration? It gets you up to speed. And you need to be able to distinguish between these two emotions in order to successfully utilize them. Otherwise, you could very well be utilizing them in a way that will actually sabotage your discipline. It will undermine your discipline. So we can make two applications based on this distinction between motivation and inspiration and discipline. First, inspiration should be utilized in order to jolt you out of a bad habit. So what does that mean? When you're inspired, you use that energy to commit to building discipline. You take it as a moment of clarity, okay? You clear your day, you sharpen the axe, you let yourself dream. You pick a performance that realizes that dream, you sign up for that performance, you pay the entrance fee, you pick a program that facilitates you winning in that performance, and then you use inspiration as a way to knock down that first domino. But don't confuse it with motivation, which is a way to maintain your current goals. The only way to make yourself disciplined, is to show up to the program to which you've already committed, which realizes, or which will help you to succeed in a performance, which realizes a dream that you've allowed yourself to dream. Okay? That's the only way to make yourself disciplined. It's to show up to the program you've already committed to and just crush it. That's the only way. If you rely on inspiration or motivation to get you there and keep you there, you will fail. That is a time-tested failing strategy. If you want to fail, rely on inspiration. You want to fail, rely on motivation. Use inspiration to wake yourself up from a stupor of self-sabotage, but don't use it for anything else. Okay? Use it to wake yourself up and then leave it behind. Okay? Second, well, look back on it. It can become a source of motivation in the future. Inspiration can translate into motivation, right? But don't require yourself to become inspired again and again and again. Second, discipline must be built without discipline. And this is a paradox, okay? It's a paradox, but it is the reality in which we live. It is unfortunate. It is undesirable. I wish we could just purchase discipline with some Mario coins or something, but we can't. Discipline must be built without discipline. The day you begin to build discipline, you have no credibility with yourself. You have no evidence to classify yourself as a disciplined person. Even your will is weak. A disciplined identity is not true of you when you begin. This is the paradox. In order to become disciplined, you must overcome this paradox. What does that mean? A disciplined identity becomes true of you as you execute your tasks with daily consistency. People think that high willpower cost of accelerating onto that on-ramp will continue for the duration of the habit, as if you have to keep your pedal on the gas the entire time just to keep the habit. That's not true. That's not how willpower works. Automaticity will kick in, and then the hard thing will become easy. Okay? The willpower cost of maintaining a behaviorally fortified, automatized habit is actually very low. And that's actually what you're aiming towards. You should count on it becoming low, but when you build it, you should count on it being harder than it will be. You should count on it being perhaps one of the hardest things you've ever done in your life, if not the hardest thing you've ever done in your life. The willpower cost of maintaining a behaviorally fortified, automatized habit is very low. But once you've built the habit, you've automated your instincts and built yourself a sense of confidence by proving to yourself that you have willpower, and by exercising the willpower like a muscle, you've actually made it stronger. You've made you stronger by being stronger. Once you've built your habit, you have automated your instincts and built yourself a sense of confidence by proving to yourself that you have willpower, and you've actually made yourself stronger. Like working out, you've actually made your mind stronger. You have actually made your will stronger. Willpower is a catch-22, and in order to become disciplined, you must forge for yourself through the fire of difficult decision the strength of will, which you will later utilize, which makes it easier and easier and easier. That every single decision you make makes you stronger. Every single decision for the right you makes the next decision for the right easier, because it makes your will stronger and because it automatizes your decision. Because the more you use your will, the more willpower you have. Building it is the hardest part, and you must perform this most difficult part of building willpower while you lack willpower, while you lack automation, while you lack confidence, and even while you lack the results that you seek. It is the hardest part. It is the hardest it will ever be. And that is the price of entry. It's the price of admission to discipline, is that you must be disciplined when you're not. And you can't cognize yourself out of it. Cognization is a false promise. It is a false path to discipline. Automatization is the path. And you only automatize a habit by doing it. Have you ever heard an undisciplined person talk about indulging in things that kill them, that sabotage them, that actually keep them from getting the things that they want and living the life that they want? It's actually very tragic when you hear an undisciplined person talk about indulging in the things that are killing them or sabotaging them. You hear a morbidly obese person talk about indulging in food, I love it. Or an angry husband complain about his wife. Or you hear a lazy college student complain about breaking the school rules or about procrastinating. And then I don't care. All of it is it's actually pathetic. They should want to change those things, but they boast about it. They brag about how undisciplined they are, right? It's the opposite of a disciplined person becoming more disciplined. You ever see people on Instagram who are like in the zone and they're like, it's all about willpower, man. Just do it. It's all about hard work. And you just look at that person and you're like, shut up. But you know what? They're right, and they are so far down the road, many of them, that they have overcome so many things. That's actually the high. It's like the cognitive philosophical high that you get from discipline, is you forget what it's like for those things to be hard, and you can achieve that through discipline. The opposite of that is like seeing a disciplined person. Likewise, they are blind. They like a person who's disciplined really doesn't understand why discipline is so hard for people. Likewise, a person who's undisciplined doesn't understand, literally cannot conceive how discipline is so easy for some people. That's the catch-22 of discipline playing itself out. It's people on one side and people on the other side of paying the cost of discipline, meaning you are disciplined when you're not disciplined. Okay? And those people they brag about how undisciplined they are, and how much they love the food they eat, and how much they hate how stupid their wives are, and how much they procrastinate and don't put effort in, and they still get A's in class, man. So who really cares, right? It's become a very white chick thing to do, right? Like, man, I could live on $1 mac and cheese. Oh my God, I love it. I don't even care. Let's get some boba tea, right? Who even cares? Let's skip class. Actually, you couldn't live on mac and cheese. You would be very unhealthy. You should live like an adult. You would feel much better. You would feel much better, okay? Your body would feel better. You would sleep better. You would focus better. You would actually learn something. Your 40-year-old self would actually thank you, okay? #adulting wouldn't actually be so hard if you were disciplined. And heck, I wish my 20-year-old self was listening to this right now, and I'm 30. The more discipline you have, the more discipline you want. The less discipline you have, the less discipline you want. Okay? Every person who feels stuck knows this. It's the catch-22 of discipline. If you wait for motivation to be disciplined, you will be waiting forever. If you wait for motivation to be disciplined, you will be a child forever. You will turn 40 or 50 or 60 and look back at your life and wonder how you never grew up. It's because you never took the chance to step on the gas and get on the highway. The emotional excruciation of being disciplined when you're not disciplined, it is very hard. I will admit that. It is excruciatingly hard. I am still on the process of that in many things in my life. But it is the invariable and inevitable cost of becoming disciplined. It is the price of entry. And you have accepted this as too high a cost. And so you have accepted from yourself a standard which will cripple you into your middle age and perhaps beyond, until you wake up one day and begin sobbing uncontrollably because you know that you can't reverse the last 20 years and you can't get back the last 20 years. Don't put yourself in that position. Do not put yourself in that position. Be disciplined today. Get your life together today. Get your health in order today. Be kind to your spouse and children today, because we are not promised tomorrow. And even if we are promised tomorrow, we are promised misery if we do not build discipline. Discipline is the path of life. If you don't care enough to do it, that's one step closer to a wasted, regretful life. And if you rely upon cognitively motivating yourself in order to be disciplined, that is likewise one step closer to a wasted, regretful life, clothed in the garb of Christian motivational advice derived from 80s and 90s psychological advice, which has since been refuted. There is happiness on the other side of discipline. There is confidence on the other side of discipline. There is virility and life in your eyes and motivation, true motivation, on the other side of discipline. But you have to push through the thorns of the on-ramp to get there. You have to push through the delusion that being inspired to go online and search for a workout routine has accomplished anything for you. A recent article in the journal called Perspectives on Psychological Science found that, which is a SAGE journal, I believe, found that self-control outpredicts talent in determining who will be successful in life. Self-control is, without qualification, more important than talent. Don't flush your life down the toilet by waiting one more day to build discipline, and don't flush your future down the toilet by wasting your willpower energy on cognizing your discipline or trying to conceive of the end in order to get enough unction to perform the high willpower task. Just do it. Don't think, just do. That is scientifically and theologically the most integrous and effective way to build discipline and integrity and success and automatization in your life. Do it, because otherwise you are on the road to death and regret. And you don't have to be. Condition yourself. Behaviorally condition yourself by doing the hard work. It will get easier. It will become automatic if you're willing to pay the price, which is to be disciplined when you're not. Be disciplined without already being disciplined. If you can do that, you can live a very successful, emotionally happy, even financially and vocationally prosperous life if you're willing to do that.